You're listening to Online Pet Health Podcasts with Dr. Megan Kelly. Continuing education for veterinarian rehabilitation therapists. Learn more at onlinepethealth.com.
Hey Vet Rehabbers! So it was such an honor because I was able to moderate the business panel at this year's virtual IAVRPT conference in June. So for those of you that don't know what the IAVRPT is, it stands for the International Association of Veterinary Rehabilitation and Physical Therapy. So I, together with 7 other dedicated, amazing vet rehabbers, sit on the board of this association. The panel discussion was so valuable, and they have kindly allowed me to share the recording of my podcast so all of you can benefit. The IAVRPT is the first and still one of the only groups around the globe which enables animal rehabilitation practitioners and scientists from all backgrounds to come together with a common goal. They're dedicated to the practice, teaching, and research of veterinary rehabilitation and physical therapy, furthering scientific investigation, and providing better patient care based on sound scientific study. If you want to learn more, you can go and check out iavrpt.org. And they've got loads of awesome members benefits. Every 2 years, they also organize a conference, and we're looking forward to the next one in Cambridge in August 2022. So for those of you that are looking for help and support in the business side of things, you can also join the Business Vet Rehabbers Facebook group. We have an amazing supportive community online there. In this discussion, the panelists Tanya Grantham, Laurie Edge-Hughes, and Lee Clarke answer questions about expanding your practice, getting funding, and what they think has helped them succeed over the years. Let's go hear what they had to say.
All right, welcome everybody. I'm really excited to be moderating this business panel. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Megan Kelly, and I'm on the IAVRPT board, and I'm based in Cape Town in South Africa. As a business mentor to a lot of vet rehabbers, I know all the challenges that you guys face when running your practices. And I think one of the big things is that we never got to learn anything about business. Well, I certainly didn't in my rehab training or my veterinary training. And let's face it, most of us did the vet rehab course or whatever course we did to get into this field because we wanted to treat animals. So often the business side of things is not a priority, but sometimes we end up owning a vet rehab practice. It's one of those things that happens. And then we're forced to have to manage people, manage clients. There's so many things and so many challenges. So I'm really looking forward today to chatting with the panelists. So Laurie, Tanya, and Lee, thank you so much for joining us. It's going to be really, really good to listen to all your points of view and to hear all the things that you've learned over the years. So to all the attendees, what I'd like is if you could please just post in the chat area if you've got any questions. If you would like to direct a question directly to one of the panelists or specific panelists, please put their name first. I'm going to ask the panelists now, and I think if we can start with Lee, then Tanya, then Laurie, just to tell the attendees about yourself, what kind of practice you've run or are running at the moment, the disciplines, and then what do you feel your strengths in your business and your practice are. So if we could start with Lee, that'd be great.
Great, thank you. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Super. Hello everyone, thank you for the invite to come and speak. First of all, I wouldn't profess to be an expert in business by any means. I have been running business for 23 years and it's still going, so it can't be too bad, but certainly not an expert by any means, but quite a good experience, I think. So I am from the UK. I live in the northeast of the UK, where I've been based for that 20 odd years. I got into veterinary physio really by accident. So I was a human physio to start off with. So I did my initial training to treat people back in '97, and then got dragged horse riding by my girlfriend, who is now wife, who talked me into going riding with her. And I thought it was a crazy idea to sit on a live animal, which has a brain of its own and a mind of its own. So I got into by accident really, and then progressed. So I trained with ACPAT, which is the association in the UK, which is part of our human branch. It's a subsidiary branch. Qualified with them in '99 when I started my own business part-time. So I was working in the NHS originally. And the first problem I came across business-wise in the NHS is that we don't handle money at all. We don't ask clients for money. We don't handle money. So it was really, really strange to suddenly start face-to-face asking for money off clients after you've treated them. So that was the first big problem I came across. After that, I then trained with small animals as well, but really haven't treated any small animals for 15 to 20 years. So I specialise now just in horses and riders. Throughout the years, I started off like everybody else, is working on your own, working part-time, building the business up slowly along with my full-time work in the NHS. Then I managed to drop some hours in the NHS and started doing more private work with the horses in particular throughout that time. And then just got busier and busier, as you do. And then we opened a rehabilitation practice, probably in 2009, 2010, where we could take inpatients in, which was really useful, because a lot of the conditions that we could see mobile really were really difficult to treat. The same problems we were treating people. So tendons, ligaments, bursas, lots of treatment really needs regular treatment, whereas when you're on the road, everyone's the same. You're lucky if you get to see your clients once a week, once a fortnight, maybe even not as often as that. So to have the inpatient facilities was amazing. We could then start to treat so many different conditions. So we built that business up. We had 3 rider clinics treating riders in particular, but lots of different human problems. We had the rehab centre, which we had for 10 years. And then built that up, and then it really kind of came to a head where we either needed to grow huge and expand even further, or to downsize. And due to family commitments and other work commitments, I decided to downsize again. So I'm actually now back to working myself again. So the pros and cons of both, which I'm sure again a lot of people have experienced. The bigger you get and the more people end up working with, the more complicated it gets, the more you start going into management, which as Megan says, that's not really what I went into to physio for in the human or animal world. So I actually found myself doing more managerial stuff than actually treatment, which wasn't for me. So I'm now back working on my own. We have a rider centre at home now, so we treat the riders at home, and I travel out and we do clinics all over the UK where we can meet people with their horses, and we can see them ride and treat the horses and the rider at the same time, check saddles, do really a kind of whole encompassing treatment on the whole complex. And to me, that's the big issue with the equine world, is treating the whole complex. The horse, saddle and the rider are one big unit, and it all needs to be treated together and all needs to be seen together. So I've had an experience doing bits of everything, from working on my own to working in a big multidisciplinary practice, which we run for 10 years, and then back to a little bit more of a simple life at the moment, working on my own.
Thanks, Lee. I'm sure the equine vet rehabbers are going to have loads of questions for you. Tanya, if we can move on to you.
Hi, afternoon, Megan, for us, and hi, everyone else, and thanks very much for this invitation as well. I would agree with Lee. I don't profess to be a business guru. I qualified as a vet in 1994 and moved straight into small animal practice. So my expertise currently lies with dogs and cats, and within about 6 months, I was offered a partnership in the practice, and I stayed there for 13 years. And then for various reasons, I sold. And 2 years after that, I found myself moving into acupuncture and physio. And in 2009, I started the business that I currently run, which is Animal Health and Hydro. And I'm based in South Africa in the Greater Johannesburg area. And I started as only me, doing everything, as I think a lot of people do. And I find myself now with 3 branch practices and 9 employees, and the demand is growing all the time. And so those challenges, that brings its own challenges. I would say that from a business perspective, I bought into an existing business which had already been around for more than 20 years when I started working. Worked through that, grew that, sold it, ran it. And then this little venture of mine, I started from scratch, which is a completely different challenge. And I would say, if I have to look at my strengths, from a business perspective, one of my clients is actually a business coach, and he started me on this journey about 7 years ago to say, okay, you have a lot of potential and it's not being used. How do we use it? And that's where my interest in business and business management and profitability and all of those things came about. Because as a vet, I'm not sure what it's like in other countries, but we don't get any business training and no accounting. And when we rely on other people, that's when a lot of troubles occur. So my strength in terms of business, I think, is innovation and always to be looking at opportunities and saying, you know, what's next? How do we make this grow? How do we serve our community and our clients and indeed ourselves a whole lot better? And from a personal perspective, which ties in with this, I've been told I'm a really great listener. And I do like to see where the troubles lie with people, both clients and with my team, and try to solve them so that we are a whole lot stronger for it, and our patients and clients benefit as a result of that. So that's me in a nutshell.
Thank you, Tanya. Over to Laurie.
Okay. And I'm like, oh my gosh, this is the hardest part, is like, what do I say here? So I started out in humans, and shortly thereafter got on at a human physiotherapy clinic where the owner was treating horses. So got involved in the whole animal physiotherapy thing within 6 months of graduating way back in 19 and essentially, you know, from there started learning and then dabbling. So I started out treating, well, I did treat a few horses, but you know, neighboring ranch horses, which I felt comfortable with, but certainly nothing that does anything fancy. So don't ask me horse questions. But I started dabbling with the dogs, and at first let's see, I've gone into other people's houses, traveled, so did in-home consults, and worked out of a vet clinic in an office there, worked out of my home office. And then in 2004, with some business partners, opened up the Canine Fitness Center in Calgary. So I've done a bunch of different places that I've worked, and different modes of working. And the Canine Fitness Center has grown. It's been really quite interesting because we grew it from only being open 3 days a week, because that's all I could do. And it was at a time too where everything was so new. But back when I started, this didn't exist. There were no other canine physiotherapists that were doing very much. The vet industry didn't know what it was. What are you? Who do you do? What do you do? We don't know what you know. So it really was a very slow progression to opening up the Canine Fitness Center in 2004, and going from myself, my business partner, and a receptionist that would run underwater treadmills sometimes, to now we are a team of 16. So it has definitely grown. We've had people ask if we would, you know, open up a second facility. And I've really thought about that. I thought, hell no. That is certainly not something I'm interested in at all, because there's enough headaches with one facility, let alone two. So we have grown significantly, where I think I wrote it down because I'm like, there's no way, I never remember on the fly, but it's like, we've got 6 with myself, 7 physios, we've got a massage therapist, and 6 assistants and or admin, my business partner, and an office manager. So it's really grown. We can see upwards to, you know, 45 dogs in a day on a super busy day. We've got 4, I have a problem with that. We have 4 therapy treatment rooms, plus an underwater treadmill room, plus an exercise area. So we can have a lot of moving parts. I don't know what else to go with there, other than, what else was I supposed to say? Strengths and weaknesses.
Where you think your strengths are?
Strengths, I think, is one in creating a good team, because I think that's so important. And, I can also speak to having a great office manager and having a not great office manager, and having someone that does not facilitate that team culture is really problematic. But we definitely had to get an office manager, because to get that size, I couldn't be doing that myself. So with all of that, and otherwise, I love marketing. So marketing is one of my favorite things, and it's actually one of those where, because during the pandemic we are so busy, we are doing better. I feel bad saying this. We are doing better than we have ever done before. So when people come in, oh, the economy, I'm like, oh yeah, damn, we're doing good. So I haven't been doing very much marketing. I've done enough to kind of keep in the face, but not the trying to get new clients kind of marketing, because they're just coming. Okay, so that's good. Did I miss something?
No, all good. Thank you, Laurie. So for those of you that have any marketing questions, you know who you can direct them to. So I see there are no questions yet. So I anticipated this. So I have a community online called the Business Vet Rehabbers. It's a Facebook group. So if any of you are interested, you're welcome to come join it. It's a free community. I think everyone, the panelists, I'm not sure if Lee's on it, but I know that Tanya and Laurie are definitely on it. So yeah, it's an amazing community that helps and support people. So what I did was I went and took some of the questions that I've seen that have been really, really important. And I think that I could start off with those to get the ball rolling. But we need each and every one of you that if you've got questions, please post them in the chat. Now's your time to get them answered. You've got 3 amazing panelists with loads of experience. So I think I'm going to start off with a question, and I think maybe this might be for you, Tanya. This might be a good one for you. There comes a point when you're working as a one-man practice when you realize you need help. It's daunting and scary to make that jump to employ someone to help you. You worry about making enough money to pay their salary as well as your own and the overheads. How have you made that transition, and when did you know the time was right?
Well, we're faced with that. I'm faced with that decision all the time, because as we grow, it's kind of like, okay, when do we get the next person, and when do we go to the next place? So I can't say that up to this point I've really had a plan. That's becoming more relevant as we grow. But I worked on my own only in my rehab facility for 2 years, and then I discovered that I wasn't able to do all the invoicing, all the treatments, all the bookings, all the everything. And I thought to myself, so I do need help. How do I maximize the help that I get? And so in order to do that, my first choice was to look for somebody who could assist me with therapy, as opposed to getting someone who is purely an administrative person. So that's where I started. So 2 years after I began, I took a leap, and I had no idea whether I would be able to pay her salary. I hadn't at that stage, I didn't do budgets. And so I put the word out, and via the clients, I found a young lady that had done the Canine Bodyworks course, which is a massage course. And she started working for me, and we just flew. That's all I can say, is we flew. And so as the years have gone by, there's people leave and people come and people go. And I went through literally about 4 years after I started, my health took a turn for the worse. And at that stage, I had 2 therapists working for me. And in my absence, things really went bad, and they both ended up leaving. And so when I came back from my time off, I had to make a decision, because by then the business was quite large. It's still only one practice. And so I hired at that stage a receptionist, administrative person, and a therapist. And from there, that's where the team stuff really started, and the business aspect of it really grew. So I hope that, I mean, it's difficult. You kind of get to a point where you think, I really need someone. I don't know whether I can afford them. And my advice would be that if you haven't done the budgets, and I still don't always do those, my advice would be, if you think you need them, bring them in, because there's this thing called the theory of vacuum. So if you create a space and you have a person who is able to do the extra therapy or the extra consultations or whatever it is you might be, that vacuum will definitely get filled. That's been my experience.
Yeah. And also, I think often when you have that extra person, suddenly your time frees up, and then you're able to, instead of doing administrative tasks, you're able to consult more, and then the money just comes in ready to pay them. So if I think back to my practice, I had a similar experience, just worrying, will there be enough money? And everyone I speak to is always in the same position. They always just say, there just is enough. It just happens, like you say. Okay, great. We've got some great questions coming in. I'm not directed at anyone, so I'm going to read the question, and then if each and one of you guys and the panelists, if you'd like to answer, then you can just put your hand up. Did any one of you need funding to grow your businesses from one-man band to big rehabilitation centers? If so, where did you get the funding from? Okay, Laurie can go first, and then Lee can also answer this one. Maybe both of you could answer it.
So for me, I basically had my business partners started off as clients, and they brought their dog in, and I think then I can't remember if it was the first or the second appointment, and they told me how they had this idea of creating a rehab facility, and I thought, oh, great, and they wanted to buy an underwater treadmill. Oh, great, competition. And so I tried to educate them on, it's not just about having an underwater treadmill. There's so much more to the rehab. And essentially then about like the dog's third appointment, they propositioned that we partner. And essentially they had the money and I had the clientele and the knowledge. So that's how I was able to open a facility.
Thanks, Laurie. Lee, you got anything to contribute on that?
Yeah, sure. We had to invest in the equine rehab place. So we had to buy a place with stables and land and equipment and everything, which was a huge investment to start off with. I was very lucky that I managed to get a decent loan off my parents. You're never too old to lend money off your parents. That's the can always do that at any age. And then we did have to take a big mortgage out to do it. And I must admit that we didn't really do a proper business plan. It was more of a case of, okay, if we have 5 stables and we have them full and we make this much money out of them per week, can we afford the repayments? It is a big leap of faith, to be fair. It is really a big decision. But there's lots of people to get advice off now, that you've got to crunch the numbers. Don't be as blasé as I probably was at the time. 15 years ago, you didn't have the big business knowledge I think that people have nowadays, and the amount of help you can get online and in person. That the help out there is huge now, where it probably wasn't before. But yeah, just make sure that you are happy that you can live and pay the bills, really. But it's great if you know you're happy to do it, and it's a big leap of faith, and that's occasionally take a risk to make not just the job satisfaction, really, not just the money, but the job satisfaction. If that's what you want to do and that's your goal, then go for it.
Great, Kirsty, thank you for that question. May asked, here in the Netherlands, physios constantly are afraid to ask a fee that is relevant to their education because of all the non-medical rivals, so unqualified therapists. How do you recommend that they handle that? Anyone on it? Lee wants to take it? Thanks, Lee.
Yeah, we have exactly the same problem. I think it's probably the same in every country. If you train to a high level, it costs you lots of money and it costs you lots of time. So you come out with student bills and you come out with lots and lots of debt. And you do need to charge for what you are worth, really. So I think when you first start out, you are probably in the good position that you probably don't have a lot of overheads, you don't have a lot of bills to pay possibly to start off with. So price yourself with what you expect to be, but probably not quite as high as people who've been doing it for a long time, because they probably have more overheads. But don't price yourself low with the people who are not as qualified as you, because reputation is everything in this industry, really. And those people who go for the cheapest people are possibly not the kind of clients that you want to rely on anyway, really. So stick to your guns, stick up for yourself, price yourself, have a good look around and make a few phone calls. And I think we've all done it as well. You make a phone call to a competitor, ask what they charge, have a ring round, see what everyone's charging and charge for what you are worth. But certainly if you're starting out, there's no reason why you can't be a little bit cheaper than those people who've been around for years and years and years. But don't sell yourself short and go too cheap. You'll just end up with a reputation of being cheap, and that's not what anyone wants.
Thank you, Lee. Tanya, you want to add something there?
Yeah, I would like to add, I think that's very sound advice. And I think that when we look at how we value ourselves in terms of our service, the way you value yourself is the kind of client that you're going to attract. So I would caution to not undervalue, because the clients that will come into your space will not value you. And then what I have seen with a number of other people is if you charge less, you are extremely busy, and then you end up running the risk of burnout. So I'd be, cautious. Something that that I do look at is in South Africa, what is the equivalent pricing for a physiotherapist in the human field? Because I think our qualifications and the work that we do maybe is not easier, but it's certainly equivalent. So I use that also as a guideline. If the human physios are doing a 20-minute or a 30-minute consultation, what am I charging for that same space of time? Because ultimately, at the moment, many of us are trading time for money. And therefore, if we undercharge, we do run the risk of not being able to be happy, not having a life, not paying our bills. So, yeah, and I think stick to it. If you know what you're worth, I would charge what you believe you're worth. Yeah.
And I would add to that is I always look at the human side, say, where are they charging? And then I want to charge more, because this, it is what I'm doing is more knowledge than what I started with when treating humans. So I will charge more than what the human physio stuff is doing. So I like that as a base. And then I do think we should be more, because we can't have 3 patients in an hour and that we're treating them all as one therapist. So there is more involved, more one-on-one time. So it's a good base, but I would go higher than that. And also, a lot of your business gurus, there is a mindset thing, right? And your business gurus will tell you, charge for the value, the outcome, as compared to thinking about when I work in a hospital, I only make this many dollars an hour. It's not even thinking about the overhead and all of that. So it's really is a change of mindset. And as far as one of the questions, how do you ask for the money? I still have problems with that. So I would say that finding somebody else to be at your front desk asking for the money helps, because I think we all suck at that component. So finding somebody else to ask. And then the other thing I have found, which is wrong, is you pick your price that's higher than what you're comfortable with. And then when people ask and they say, well, how much is your initial assessment? You say, well, the initial assessment incorporates, or you put in, the initial assessment is $293, but with that, you will get this, and that. So they understand everything that goes into it. So in part, I don't end with or just provide, here's what the price is, but it's how you wrap it up and package it, right? So it's a present that you spent time making the wrapping look so fabulous that they're like, I don't even care if what's in there is some made in China piece of crap. This is the most beautiful present I've ever seen. And that's a mindset shift. So I will give them all of the benefits of it without the price being the final answer. So they want to see me no matter what, because I've made it seem so great.
Thanks, Laurie. You remind me of when I was in practice. I remember being by myself and having to do the invoices and collect the money. And I remember one of the things that I loved the most about getting a receptionist was they would ask, like, how much is all? I said, oh, speak to Marianne outside. She's the one who deals with all of that. And I love that, just being able to pass it on and just focus on treating. Leslie has a comment about what we're discussing. Leslie, I'm amazed that you're still awake. It's an Australia time. I don't know if it's 1, 2 o'clock in the morning. So thank you so much for being here. She says, that's a good question for May. I think vets and physios are hugely undervalued for the training that is undertaken. My thoughts are you should charge as for your value and let the public make their choices. The outcome speaks. So thanks for that, Leslie.
Agreed.
Okay, so Sam Forrest asks, any advice for starting a rehab business up from scratch? What pieces of equipment did you focus on initially, and how did you grow your referral pool? Any other good tips?
There's about 5 questions in that.
There is. Okay, so let's start with any advice for starting a rehab business up from scratch?
Yeah, my advice would be your knowledge and your hands are your best pieces of equipment. And once you start building a reputation with those, then you can look at investing money into equipment. So if that's all you have and you're good at what you do, I really think you'll be successful.
Thanks, Tanya. Anyone want to add about those 2 questions, starting a rehab from scratch and pieces of equipment that you focused on initially? Lee?
Yeah, I would say that one of the biggest things to start off with is communication and getting to know everybody else in your field. Particularly in the UK, we need our veterinary support. I'm not sure what it's like in the rest of the world, but we have to have veterinary permission to treat an animal. We can't treat an animal without that permission. So really, your vet has to be your best friend almost, really. And I found it really difficult starting off to get those referrals because you send in requests to vets and they don't know who you are or what you are. So I did a lot of going into vet practices, meeting vets face to face, sending them information as much as I can to tell them who I am, what I do, what physio does, because they really still didn't quite get the grasp and still don't get the grasp in the UK what physios do in the animal world. The vets are really, it's almost quite separate. I know in Europe, when I've worked in Europe, it almost seems to be a lot more vets are educated towards what chiropractors and osteopaths and physios do. But in the UK, it's very separate. You never find really a vet who does any rehab at all. It's 2 separate things. But although they're separate, the 2 have to go together. So that communication line is essential for everybody. You'll not get support from the vets or from, in my case, farriers, saddlers, dentists, and you won't get referrals from unless they know you. So really make an effort to get yourself out there and go and meet everybody and get a relationship with them.
Laurie?
Okay, and to tag on to that, I would say that it's very much 2-pronged in that, how's this? And especially when you're just starting, it's really difficult to get the vets to refer to you. I always say your best target market is the clients themselves, in that you want them to want you, but you have to marry that with the vets. The other people in the industry have to know who you are. So if you only market to the vets, that doesn't always get you what you want. But if and you want to then market to the public, because that's going to build the interest in coming to see you, but then the vet has to simultaneously know who you are. And then why is my client asking to go see this person? So you have then tagged into that. So it has to be 2-fold, I think.
Thanks, Laurie. Tanya?
Yeah, I think this is really interesting because the other question is, how did you grow your referral pool? And so although I am a vet, what happened with me was I made a point in the beginning, and in 2009, it was really only beginning in South Africa with regards to physical rehabilitation. I made a point of whether or not a vet referred the patient. I contacted them after I had seen the patient. So I always asked the client, who is your primary veterinary practitioner, or who is your general practitioner? I always contacted them and said, I'd seen the dog. This was the diagnosis. If I wanted extra information, I asked the vet for the information. But the important aspect was to say, I've seen the dog. I've started a 4, 6, 8-week program, whatever, so that they knew, even though they hadn't referred the dog, they knew that the dog was in a complementary or an adjunctive treatment protocol. And then when I got to my reassessment, which is anywhere between 4 and 8 weeks, I made a point of sending them a written report. And I still do that. And I think that has really helped to cement the credibility of physiotherapy or physical rehabilitation within my area anyway. So I think that communication is vitally important. I mean, I agree with Laurie as well in terms of you can't ignore the clients and you need to market to them, because they often drive the desire or the need. They will often go to their vet and say, but I want to take my dog to physio. So you do still need to focus on them, but in terms of getting professional referrals, that certainly worked for me.
Thanks, Tanya. Thanks, Lee and Laurie. And one of the things that I think is important to chat about is that those referrals take a while to build up. So initially you start off and you often get that word of mouth from pet owners. And then it takes a year or two for those relationships to build up. And sometimes when you go to that vet the first time, they don't want to speak to you or they don't give you the time. And what I want to say is don't give up. I started in 2006, 2007 here in South Africa. I was called the Hocus Pocus Vet because they thought I used to do like crystals and smoke and things. It was really difficult. I remember going to practices and vets really, like I could hear them say, I don't want to talk to her. And I could hear her like in the waiting room. And I remember it hit me really hard and it was really difficult. And I just persevered. And I can remember a vet actually saying to me that he will never, ever refer anything to me because he doesn't believe in anything that I do and there's no science behind it. He didn't even give me any opportunity to talk to him. And so I just left it at that. Anyway, probably 4 or 5 years later, he was one of my biggest referral vets. And it all started from me treating his dog. So he was desperate. He didn't know what to do. His dog had had surgery. His dog was paralyzed. So what I want to say is don't give up, guys. Just keep on speaking to the vets. I mean, you don't have to obviously keep nagging them if they're not, but try different ways in which to reach them. And the other suggestion that I have is that I found that getting in the media, so getting in PR, going on the radio, I know it's a bit daunting, but if you put yourself out there, you also get exposed to pet owners and to the vets. And if you get yourself published in a veterinary magazine, you approach them and say, I'd love to write an article about a rehabilitation topic, and the vets start reading that, they become more aware of our profession, and they become more aware of you. And lecturing too has also been something that's really, really helped me. And once I started doing that, I really started to see vets opening up and more sort of open to chat to me. Laurie, did you want to add something?
Yeah. So one of the things that I had learned, actually, it was a vet I had taught who had worked for one of the drug companies. And she had brought it up. She said, well, in our training, we were taught that there's 4 personalities. And you've got to recognize these 4 personalities. You've got the empathetic, who's going to do it because it's the right thing to do. You've got the entrepreneur, who's going to be, well, what's in it for me? Okay. And, now I forgot them. And then you've got the skeptic, who is never going to refer, right? Or they injure themselves, have to go for physio, and they recognize what it is. And then you have the academic who says, prove it. So if you look at that spectrum, you kind of know that you're going to have these 4 personality types. And so the same marketing isn't necessarily going to hit all of those, or if you do one marketing, it might target one of those people, but not the other. So then that leads into my point 2, which is never look at it as one point communication, right? So it could be, I send a letter or a package in the mail, and then I follow up with something else, and then I follow up with something else on that. And then maybe I phone the clinic to see if I can book an appointment to come talk to the person, or do a lunch and learn for the clinic. But you should think about it as multi-step. So it's not just one and done, that your marketing needs to be several times. And I would always say too, that you are educating, or marketing too, basically, but educating about your services one vet at a time, one condition at a time. So don't expect that the vets in that practice actually talk to each other. Oftentimes they're too busy. So you may have, vet A who's like, oh my gosh, I love this clinic, I send everything there. And vet B at the same clinic has never heard of you. And how can that be? But everybody's in their own little thing doing their own stuff, and maybe they don't talk about, well, I referred this patient over to that clinic and they did great. And one condition at a time. So just because you did a great job on a post-op cruciate doesn't mean they think about you for the lumbosacral disc disease. So it can be quite frustrating, but also just to recognize that it needs to be perpetual.
Yeah, great advice, Laurie. And I think, what you say about the vets is so true. Like, I can remember when I was in small animal practice, most of the time, if you're in a really busy practice, you actually don't speak to the other vets. You don't speak to anyone. You spend most of your time consulting, operating. Maybe you get to speak to whoever's doing the anesthesia on the ops and the nurses. Those are the people you get to spend time with. But we often just pass each other. And when it's really busy, we don't even have time to go to the toilet or eat. It's really that hectic, and we'll get there at 7:30 in the morning and leave at 7:30 at night, and we just work flat out. And I know that's a little bit like sometimes some of our rehab practices, but I feel like in rehab practice, I got to speak to my colleagues more than I did in veterinary. So great advice. It's just because you speak to one vet there doesn't mean that they have passed the information on to the rest of the vets. So there's a question which we had in the Business Vet Rehab group, which I think is something that I'd love to ask now. And it's on the lines of the marketing. So somebody said, I'm so busy consulting, managing staff that I never seem to have time to market my practice. I know it's important, but it just gets pushed to the bottom of the list. How do I put an effective marketing strategy into place, and one that is sustainable? So I'd love to hear from the panelists how you've done this, because I think what happens is we all know we should be doing it, but before we know it, a month, 2 months, 3 months has gone by and we haven't done one thing, or maybe we've popped in at one vet, but we know that it has to be sustainable. We have to make time to do it. So I'd love to hear how you guys have put your strategies into place and how you have maintained them. Who wants to go first? Tanya.
Yeah, I think in the beginning for me, it was all about word of mouth and all about maintaining or building relationships with my colleagues. And I was very fortunate that one of my clients, who happened to be a skeptic, thanks, Laurie, she was, the vet says my dog is in pain and she's got to come for acupuncture, and big rolling of eyes. I don't believe in this, and so on and so forth. And if I get another a year out of my dog, I'll be happy. And 5 years later, we were still treating the dog. So this person has become, I would say, my greatest fan. And I'm very fortunate that she also does a lot of business management and a lot of marketing management. And she approached me and she said, I'd really like to market your practice. And so what I would say is never look a gift horse in the mouth. I had no way of paying her. And she said, for the gift that you've given me, I could never repay you. So please allow me to try and let's see what happens. So that was the start. And she has since taught me, along with my business coach, I'm not ashamed to say that I need coaching, is that there really should be a plan. So, and the plan needs to focus around what is it that you're trying to achieve. So what Laurie has said about the different people, it's got to be multi-pronged, but it also needs to be, what do you want to say? So you don't just put marketing out there for marketing's sake. You need to know what is your message. And I see in the chat, there's talk about, you must be clear about your why. So what are your values? What is it that you want to achieve? How are you representing yourself out there? So when you're creating a marketing plan, you don't just quickly put it together and say, oh, I need to put something on Facebook or social media, or I need to send out an email. So that's the first thing. I'll keep it brief. The second thing that I've learned, and we plan our strategy. So I'm a bit bigger and I'm not on my own anymore. And so I'm very fortunate that I'm able to delegate, but we meet every month and we have a planning meeting. And part of that planning meeting, there's the marketing and the strategy of, how do we get out there? Who are we trying to reach? What are we trying to do? Number one. Number two, I would say if you're on your own and you do intend to go and see vets, book that in your diary as an appointment and don't renege on it. In the end, it'll be more valuable than that consultation fee. So although you will look at it and you may say, oh, but I really need to see this patient, I really need the money, whatever the conversation is going in your head, don't not go to that appointment. That appointment that you've made with the vet or the colleague or whoever it is that you want to promote where you want to promote your business, it must be set in stone. And once you start using that, I found once I've started using that and not telling myself that if I don't do this, I'll do it later, because later never comes. If I stick to the appointments that I've made, I've also found that has served me very, very well.
Yeah, I mean, often if we make that decision, we're going to go see a vet this afternoon, then there's always something better that comes up, something on that list of to-dos. We think, well, maybe we should do that first, because it's uncomfortable to go to the vet.
Yeah.
It's not. Lee and Laurie, anything to add there?
I'm probably the opposite at the moment, in the fact that we do very little promotion or anything, purely because of time, and I'm so busy anyway. It's difficult sometimes that I get more stressed when I'm too busy. So if I've got clients on the phone asking me, when can you see my horse? When can you see me? When can I get booked in? That's when I get more stressed. So actually, we tend to go through phases where if it starts to kind of drop off a little bit, we'll do a little bit more on social media. If we're really busy, then we tend to stop, which is probably not the best thing to do at all. So it's not a recommendation, but it's how it's working out. But one of the best piece of advice I heard was actually on the Vet Rehab forum, on one of their talks there, was to make your clients advertise for you. And I can't remember who the speaker was at the time, but they were saying, certainly for social media to clients, is that you want that client to take a picture and put it on their social media, and for them to big you up rather than you have to do it all the time. And so if you can do something to that client that makes them so excited or so pleased about something that they then go home and put it on their social media and advertise it to their hundreds of friends, then that is the best free advertising you can get. And that's the way I try to do things at the moment, just because I'm not very good at it. So that's my approach at the moment.
Great, thanks, Lee. That actually reminds me. So I'd like to ask all of you guys to take a picture of yourselves at the conference today, listening, and please post it onto social media and tag the IAVRPT, and we'd really appreciate it. Laurie, anything to add?
Sure. Just to bring up that I think how you market is an evolution of where you're at in your practice. So in the beginning or in a established stage. So in the beginning, where you've got more time, so you should go and do some vet visits. But at this point in time, for me, I'm not doing any vet visits. At this point in time, I target to the clients. I target the dog owners, because that's what drives my business. And I look at the reports that I send back, the initial assessment, progress notes, discharge notes. I look at that as my marketing to the vets at this point in time. I have not found vets to be very receptive to marketing, in that you try all these magical things and you're like, oh, you know, we've done specials for vets only in April. And it's like, you might get 2 that take you up on the special offer to treat their dog at half price or something. But the client marketing is where I would totally focus. I was starting to write notes, and that's the only one I got, was it's totally an evolution. And then beyond that, like if you are so busy, then you don't really need to do tons of additional marketing, right? So yeah, you can do the Facebook post, get your clients to post it. I like that too. And clients love doing that anyways, and they love that they get to, you know, when their dog gets highlighted and you just ask them for that. Couple of things, when I have slowed down, and it hasn't been since I've had the clinic, you know, well, not through the pandemic, but whenever we slow down, I have always found that it's great to do, you know, callbacks or emails to your clients that have dropped off, because that has always kind of brought more clients back into the fold. So you've got your past clients that you can reactivate in through that. And that's a huge target market, because they have friends, they likely have dog friends. So you've got your internal marketing, and then you have external marketing where you're trying to get people that have never heard of you before. And like Tanya said, to come up with a plan is great, where you can look at, you know, here's what I'm going to do, and to recognize you don't have to do it all at once. So if you look at, well, I'm going to try and start to be good on Facebook and get all of, you know, do this and get yourself into a rhythm where you do Facebook, where you maybe have your key sites where you're like, oh, I know I can always share something from that site, or I need my staff to take a picture of a dog in the underwater treadmill, you know, so we got that. So maybe you focus on that until it becomes automated. And then you add in another facet where you're like, okay, I need to do direct emails to all of my client base list. And in your emails, you're going to have something cute, something informative, and a promotion. And then, so back when we were pre-pandemic, I had a promotion every month, something that would go out. We'd send a postcard that was eye-catching. We'd send the e-blast. We'd post it on Facebook. And so every month there was an offer. So we were continually in front of them. Anyways, I'm just like, oh, and you can do this, and oh, and you can do that. But it likely is good to start with something small, right? And get that into an automated format, and then start adding on different tactics.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. And your advice about, you know, looking at customer or client retention as well as acquisition. So a lot of us think, how can we get more clients in the door? Think about how you can keep the clients that you have and keep them coming. I think is really, really good advice. Thanks, Laurie. Laurie, I think this is one for you. So I'm not a people person. I prefer to treat my patients and wish I did not have to deal with any people. But the reality is I have to. How do I handle all the different personalities in my team as well as my clients? I wish I could afford a practice manager so I can just get on with my job and not have to worry about staff. So I think, you know, you mentioned that your team is something that's good. And I think, yeah, this will probably be our last question. So Laurie, if you can start with that, that'd be great.
Well, what's interesting is that you ended that. I thought this was going to be about clients and not liking the clients, but then it turned into a staff question. Let me go to clients first, because I have an answer for that right off the bat. And the liking the humans that come with the dog, I think, is important. I did it. It was just kind of a fun talk that was at our Canadian Physiotherapy Association conference. And it was something that you're good at, that isn't necessarily physio, but makes you a better physio. And I had put that it was, you know, looking at, you know, body language, and which is so important for us working with dogs. But one of the things I found when treating people is to find one thing that's likable about them, because and interesting, because everybody has something that's interesting. So it's just a matter of getting to that question to find out what's interesting. I had this one guy and he was just, everything was just, yeah, well, this dog's not as good as my last dog. Seriously, he said that. How are you doing? Well, I don't know. Well, anyways, his passion was beer. And he would write articles on beer. He had done beer testing. And it got to the point, once I found his interesting point, he'd be out in the waiting room and everybody like, how you doing, Mike? It's all right, it's raining. And then he'd come I'd open the door to my treatment room for him to come in, and it was like blah, 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 mile a minute, because I found the sweet spot that he liked to talk about, and he knew I would talk to him about that. Okay, so that's clients. And dealing with the people, I would say that that's tough. That's where a good office manager can make you or break you, as far as culture. Culture at the clinic where, people enjoy coming, people are respected, making it fun. I would not want to be an office manager, but I think it's important to learn about all your staff again. So it kind of fits in. Learn what they like, learn what makes them tick, learn what makes them happy. And if they, so then if they feel valued and cared about, it just makes a happier environment altogether. I don't know, I kind of spun that weird, but.
Lee, Tanya, any recommendations on how to deal with all the different personalities in your staff?
We don't have staff anymore, but time at the staff. I think it's selecting the staff in the first place.
Yes.
I think we've got to be really careful about that. And we've had some fantastic staff, and we've had some absolutely terrible staff that have really caused problems within the whole team. And all it takes is one person who is not a team player, who for whatever reason has taken the job but doesn't really want to be there, or doesn't want the job, but they've taken it anyway to make that. So I would just say be very careful employing in the first place. Once they're in the door, that's the difficult bit. And I can understand. I'm not particularly a people person anyway. I'm quite lucky with horses that most of my clients are women who, no offense, but just like to have a little jibber jabber anyway. And most of the time my problem is getting a word in rather than actually getting them to talk. So I'm much more of a listener than a talker. So it works quite well in my business. But I do have sympathy with the staff thing, because I've been there and I've done that. And it is really difficult. But it is, as you say, making an effort to get to know them. Try and find something nice about them, try and find what their hobbies are, what their interests are, and trying to turn that corner.
Thank you, Lee. Tanya, anything to add there?
I do. What I found, firstly, to tie in with Laurie, is what is the culture, and what are the values of your business. So it's really important that the people that move into your space as part of your staff or part of your team share your values and your culture. And we've also had plenty people move in and move out that haven't shared our values. And the mistake that I made at the time was I hired in desperation. So I really, really needed someone to fill that spot. And whoever that person was at the time came in. And so what I'm working on right now, and it might be food for thought and it might be good for some and not for others, but I'm working on how do I create a base from of people, of professionals that I can call upon when I need them, that share my values. And it's really in its infancy, and it's not anywhere near even being a reality, but it makes sense to me that if I can meet with people and I can have people that move in my space and out of my space, various spaces that have a similar way of practicing and a similar set of values to what my business does, then when I'm desperate, I would rather have that backup to call upon than to take whoever decides to drop in on my doorstep. So yeah, watch the space maybe. I don't know.
I've also made the mistake of hiring people that don't really align with me and my practice. And in the beginning, what I didn't realize is that I should have actually created core values for myself and for my business. And after I had multiple people that, and the thing is that they're actually great people. So like they're great vet rehab therapists, or they're great therapists. And, when you meet them, like there's great things about them, but there's sometimes just one or two things that just don't align. And then you start to sort of knock heads. And when you're hiring, you look at their CV and you think, well, this person's got all this experience, they're great. But if they don't align with your core values, and it can be one really, really simple thing, and it could be something like maybe your ethics and how you practice, or how you communicate, or like if something's okay for you and not okay for them, or whatever. Once there's that misalignment, then that's when problems start to happen. And then afterwards, when I sat down and created my core values, then I looked at these people that didn't align, who I'm still in contact with, and they're great people, but they just didn't work out. And I realized, oh, that's why, because that core value, there was a misalignment there. So if I can recommend to you guys to sit down and just work out what's important to you. So how do you practice? And you want the same thing in your team. And then when you actually interview, instead of asking the questions, where did you work and what did you do, think about questions aligned to your core values. So give them scenarios where you want to know, like, would they do the same thing that you would do? And if they don't answer that right, then there's a sort of little alarm bell that rings that maybe they're not so well aligned. So I think our time is up. Tanya, Lee, and Laurie, thank you so much. It's been really, really wonderful. Thank you for all your advice and support. I feel like there were so many more things that we could have covered. So I think we'll definitely have to have another one of these business panels. And thank you to all of you that have come today and attended.
If you enjoyed this podcast, please hit the subscribe button so you get notified every time I load a new podcast. And please, if you get a moment, head over to Stitcher or iTunes and leave me a review. It's a really lonely job being a podcaster, and so the only time I get to hear from you or know that you're out there is when I get a review. And know that I read every single one of your reviews. So to those of you that have left reviews, I want to say a very, very big thank you. Every time we get a review, it really helps to get the Veterinary Rehabilitation Podcast out there to all the vet rehabbers all over the world. All right, vet rehabbers, so if you are looking for more continuing education in the field of veterinary rehabilitation, head over to onlinepetart.com. Go be awesome, guys.